What is the soul? The soul is infinite, and it is eternal, just as the spirit is eternal and also infinite. But the soul and the spirit are actually two different things stemming from one thing. The difference between the soul and the spirit is that the soul is passive in relation to the spirit, and the spirit is active in relation to the soul. Or to put differently, the spirit is the activity of the soul, and the soul is the product of the spirit. The soul is infinitely large, and the spirit is infinitely small. But the soul and the spirit are connected somehow. And how are they connected? Well, if you have the spirit as an infinitely small thing, and the soul as an infinitely large thing, you have, in a sense, two directions. It would seem that they are two different things, but in fact, if there is only infinity, then the infinitely small and the infinitely large are one and the same. They're only separated, in a sense, when the spirit takes activity, when a decision is made, when a focus is practiced, and the soul reacts to it. And so the soul gravitates towards the spirit when the spirit is active, and the spirit gravitates towards the soul when the spirit is passive. And from that passivity of the spirit, the soul reveals itself, but only after the spirit has had some kind of activity. So, in a sense, you could say that once the spirit has revealed itself, so too the soul reveals itself. And so, in relation from the spirit, what is the soul? Well, if the spirit, or the spirit being, the infinitely small, that infinitesimal point in infinity at large, when the soul, uh, when the spirit, is acknowledging its activity, or when it is simply active, what the soul in this particular case, in a pure infinity, what the soul is saying to the spirit is that you are also infinitely large, even though the spirit in its activity is that infinitesimal point. So in this abstract context, the soul is simply revealing its infinity, that it is infinitely large, not in its potential necessarily, because any activity of the spirit is a division, well, a unity onto itself, but a division from its larger self. Because once an activity is done, in the infinitely small sense, that any division from infinity has to be an infinitely small point, any division that is done is going to, even though it is infinite within itself, it's going to reveal a larger infinity. And so, in a way, it is the duality that is created between the self and the self. And that duality is two infinities staring into each other. And so the spirit asking itself the question, what am I? Looking within, you are infinite. And when the spirit then not deactivates but surrenders to infinity, it finds itself within infinity. And then, in that sense, the soul reveals itself as such, as a passive reminder of that infinity. In a more complex context, we could imagine that the spirit is within a separate body. So this infinitesimal point, let's say, within a human being. And so the human being goes through life and asks, what am I? And the tools that we use, of course, generally, is language. And that language then refines itself after all the divisions and unities and labyrinthine complications, contradictions, paradoxes. You come to one specific conclusion, that the self that is asking itself that question is an activity. And that activity, when faced with what it is exactly, is that it is a causality in its own right. It is an agency that cannot have, if we talk about agency in its purest form, cannot have any prior cause. And the only thing that cannot have a prior cause is something that is infinite. And so, the next attempt to do a logical step is, well, if I am infinite, am I infinity at large? Am I the infinite space? The practice of the volition, the practice of the agency of the self, the activity of the spirit as volition, will reveal that as much effort as is given in this empirical and experimental test whether or not the volition can have an infinite amount of influence on the world, not in potentiality but in actuality, you'll see that it's not raining exactly when you want it to, it's not sunny exactly when you want it to, the money that you want, the relationship that you want, they're not instantaneously appearing to you like in a dream. And so there is another infinity that is possible, and that is the infinitely small, the infinitesimal point that is within another infinity. And this, in a way, is a very humbling moment, but also very empowering, that even though the spirit has a scintillating presence as this fiery infinitesimal point, there is also then the appearance of the soul as the passive, and saying, now that you have awoken, I shall appear to you towards your greater identity, your path, because the infinitely small and the infinitely large are one and the same. But you are in a body, and this spirit that is within you wants to experience itself. And that experience of the self is leading you back to your infinity at large, so that the infinity at large and the infinitesimal point become one and the same. And then you thus, from that point on, experience the world simultaneously as infinitely small and infinitely large, keeping perspective of what you are at any given moment, or that the moment, being eternal, reminds you of infinity, either infinitely small or infinitely large. And so the soul appears in different forms as a nudge to move you towards that reconciliation between your infinitely small self, your choice, and the soul, this passive appearance or reminder that you are also infinitely large, and that when you become infinitely large, any decision that is made from that perspective. And the soul thus can appear as synchronicities in life, as dreams, as spontaneous manifestations, as incredible and illogical occurrences in life, as a response to a question, as a response to a decision that was directly aimed at infinity at large, and then that infinity at large responds and says, this way.